G'day, Jinx here, and welcome to what should be the final tutorial in this graphics series. And in this one, we're going to be talking about editing the Playpal and the ColourMap in sRGB apps. Now, two things before I start. One, when I first made this tutorial, it came out at almost 2.5 hours because I had a lot of editor stuff, you know, like working inside Affinity, where I showed you how I made the layers or how I made the documents that I was using to edit these files, and it's just too long. So I've cut that all out of this video, but I'm going to upload the original one, the original unedited one, just so it's there if you want to see it. The link will be in the description. Also, don't forget that this is like, I think the 5th video or something like that in this graphics series. So there's going to be some concepts that I've explained in previous videos, like what is a Playpal, what is a ColourMap, you know, how do they function? Those kind of things are going to be in those other videos, and that way I don't need to repeat them, and that's going to cut down some time as well. Right, let's get into this. I'm going to create a little DoomTools project for me to work in. I'm not going to show all the creation of it anymore because it just takes up too much time. I mean, I've done it literally in every single video on the channel, so it's the exact same process. Then once I do that, I'm going to run the build target rebuild palettes. So that's just DoomMake rebuild palettes. I use a bat file called dmake, which is basically just a shorthand for DoomMake. Every time I write dmake, it's just DoomMake. And I'm just going to go rebuild the palettes. So what this rebuild palettes command does is extract from the Doom2 WAD a little bit of data. 2 PNG files. One is a representation of the 14 palette Playpal, and the other one is a representation of the primary ColourMap. And then I'm just going to make a base version of the WAD. So I've got my project set up, and then I'm just going to make a little folder here. I'm going to call it Doom2 Orig. And in there, I'm just going to copy in ColourMap from where it was extracted to into the source directories, or move in the ColourMap, beg your pardon. I'm going to move the DoomTools version of the palette file as well. So what we've got here is I've just extracted a bunch of data from the original Doom WAD just to have as backup. Now, the main application I'm going to be using during this tutorial is called Affinity by Kavana, which is a completely free application, and it's free. So you can check it out if you want to use it. So here we are in Kavana, and remember, we are now in an sRGB image editing app. You might use Photoshop, you might use Gimp, you might whatever, it doesn't matter. We don't even have to worry about palletizing the data because we're actually editing the palette here. So you can use true color without having to worry about anything. So you got all the tools you're used to using, do whatever the hell you want. My point here is that methodology inside painting apps is as varied as grains of sand on a beach. I mean, you can pretty much do anything. I just want to try and get across how malleable the palette is and how malleable the graphic data is when you're working with DoomTools in this kind of open way. And the first thing we need to do is load up the palette that DoomTools exported. And now we've talked about this a couple of times. This is just a representation of all 14 palettes in single pixel lines. So it's 256 pixels wide, and the index color values are 1 pixel each across the top in each row. And then the 14 palettes are just the other 14 rows of this image. So if I zoom in, this square here, that would be PAL 8 or palette 9 in SLADE, which is the full heavy hardcore paint palette. And then all these down to PAL 1 are just the variations in intensity of the paint palette. And then we have 9 to 12, which is the palettes for the item flash, and the very bottom one is the Radsuit. Okay. So what we want to do, we want to turn this image into an editable image that allows us to use all our fancy tools and then just output a working palette straight to Doom to test. Okay, so here I have the document created. Remember, there's another sister tutorial to this, which is the exact same tutorial, but has a lot more of the mechanical stuff inside it. And I split it out because the tutorial was like almost 2 hours long. So if you want to know how I created this, I go through the step-by-step process of showing you how I physically build this file. But in this one, just to speed everything up, I'm just going to explain what it is. And basically all it is if we look at the actual original Doom palette, right? This is the original palette that comes when you export it from DoomTools. We have the pane gradient, we have the Pal 0 at the top, then we have the pane gradient, then we have the item gradient, and then we have the Radsuit palette at the bottom. So what I've done is I've actually recreated that in layers. So if I go into my document, you see I've got what I call a blank Playpal, which is just basically Pal 0, so the top line copied into all 14 rows. That's all it is. It just means there's no difference between the Pal 0, the one you've created for your actual palette in inverted commas, and all the other special palettes. They're all identical. And then on top of that, I've created the actual gradients and the Radsuit palette as editable lines. So if I just turn off the item palette and the pane palette, you can see that the Radsuit palette is just a single pixel line on the bottom that I have set to the color 03 FD03, and I've set it to a opacity level of 13%. And that's all I've done. Now the item palette is a little bit more complicated, and the same with the pane palette. Basically, if I just turn off the matte, you can see, I'll turn on the pane palette as well, I'll turn off the matte. These are just pure color boxes covering the area that has the lines. So the pane palette is FF and the item palette is D7B944. That's the color of the gold. And I got these colors from the SLADE source code. So it's the same color values that SLADE use. And then all I've done is create a layer as a mask that is an opacity fall off. And that creates the actual gradient of graduating color to create the different levels of these pane flashes and item flashes. And if I just click on the pane mat and I just have a look at my gradient, you can see it's just a gradient. The bottom level is 88% opacity and the top level is 8% opacity. If I go to the item mat and I have a look at it, you can see that it's actually 1 pixel down. That's the gradient stops 1 pixel before the end. And the lowest value is 13%. And the highest value is 50%. And that is the gradients that I've used in this demo. And that allows me to edit the color and the opacity gradient separately from each other. It gives me a lot of control because everything's separated out into layers. This is my recreated file with the opacity layers. And this is the original Doom palette. And it's not 100% identical, but it's basically identical. No one's really going to notice the difference. In the file, I have actually included for you a file called generated tint exact. This is generated by my custom script, and it is literally the exact values that are in Doom. So if I turn off and on this group, you can see that the resulting gradients on Pal 0 are actually identical to the original Doom Pal if you use this layer. And this is, you can use this if you want. The point is that this is just a single file with just the opacity levels. You can still use your HSV adjustments and change the colors, but it's not quite got as much control as the other version. So that's basically what this file is. It is just a editable version of our palettes. So what I'm going to do now, just as a little test, I'm just going to export our custom Playpal, the one we just made. So file, export it as a PNG. I'm going to go into my DoomTools project, go to source, go into convert, go into palettes, and just save it as playpal.png. And there's our file there. So now I'm just going to go into the root and load up a command line. And I'm just going to type in doom make clean just to ensure that it's clean. And then I'm going to just run a doom make. And that's going to use our Playpal image that we just created as the Playpal in the game. Now I've recorded a demo file called playpaleditor.lump. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this. And I'm going to record the demo using our custom palette. And after this finishes recording, I'm going to do the same thing, but with the original palette so we can compare the differences. And now that that's played, I'm just going to go back into my source dir, go back into my convert dir, go back into my palette dir and delete that. So now we no longer have a palette. And then I'll just do the same thing. So I'll just do it clean just to be certain. I'll do a Doom make, and I'm going to play the same demo, and this time it's going to be using the default Doom palette. Now, as you can see, even though these palettes that we just created, this editable palette, isn't completely 100% identical, though of course if you put enough effort into it you could make it identical, it's basically identical. No one playing the game is ever going to really notice the difference. But because we've edited it in the way we've edited it, we can make absolutely drastic changes, or even really subtle ones, with almost no effort at all. So let's have a look at that in action. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate the PAL13 section. I'm just going to drag it under the end just so I've got it back up. So let's go into here, and there's so many things we can do. For starters, we'll go to the Radsuit, and you know, we'll just change the color. So what I like to do is just set it to 100% so we can see it a bit clearer. Why don't we make the Radsuit color a kind of no, let's make it like an orangey color. How about something like that? So I set that to 13, and now we've got a new Radsuit, custom Radsuit. For the item color, why don't we just change that from a kind of gold? Why don't we make it a purpley color, purpley pinky color? Actually, let's make it a greeny color. No, let's make it a purpley pinky color. And how about for the paint palette? Why don't we do something a bit interesting with the paint palette? So what we're going to do now is that we're going to adjust the colors of the actual paint palettes, but we're going to retain the exact same way the paint palettes are overlaid on top of the PAL0 by not affecting the opacity at all. And that is why we separated out the opacity levels from the color layers. So we can adjust the opacity and how the gradient of opacity works across the different palettes, separate to the colors, in two completely separate editable fields to allow us to have maximum control. So we click on the paint palette and we'll grab the gradient tool, and I'll just do a gradient up like that. Let's click on the first color, and why don't we make this a kind of blue, and why don't we make the bottom shell, the bottom color, a kind of pink, and you know, let's add some more colors in. We'll make this one a green, and we'll make this one, how about a yellow, and we'll just drag that around a little. So we'll change that to a, there we are. And then we just turn back on the matte. So we've drastically edited this palette with almost no effort at all, right? Well, not the palette, I should say. The PAL0 is the same. We just edited the paint palettes, the item palettes, and the Radsuit palette. So let's export this. We'll just save it as Playpal into that same folder. So now we have the Playpal here. We'll just do a Doom make. And we'll just run it normally just so I can show you the, so if I put on the Radsuit palette, you can see that's our Radsuit palette now, that kind of orangey look. You can see it on the left. Probably needs a little bit of a tweak. If I just shoot here, you can see we have a multicolored paint palette now. And if we pick up some items, you can see we've got the kind of purpley, bluey flash or whatever we set it to. And again, this is the actual Radsuit palette that we've got at the moment. So that probably needs a bit of a fix. Let's come back in here. We'll just go to our palette, go to our Radsuit, and let's just change that to 20 for this one instead of 13, make it more aggressive. We'll just export it again, overwrite the same Playpal, just run the Doom make. And then you can see it's a lot more aggressive. Drag it up. Let's make it 100. And instead of doing that, we're going to use an overlay. Let's make it a multiply overlay and make it 82. And that's the thing, because it's an actual palette and it doesn't need to conform to any kind of paletted color because it's creating the paletted color itself. We can basically make it look like anything we want. We don't have to worry about the palette. So there you go. So now it's a much more aggressive look. That looks a little bit better. Come into the light. Yeah. Anyway, that's basically the point of having it in this malleable format. So you can just change it so drastically, so easily. I mean, or you could change it really subtly. I'm just doing it drastically so you can see the results. Anyway, the point is, now that we've decided on how our actual item flash, pane palette, and Radsuit's going to look, let's turn off those overlays, and now we can just edit the actual palette itself by editing this, which is Pal 0. And again, you can do this in the exact same way. It's all RGB tools. So for example, we know from the previous tutorials that we did that the 16 pixels of this brown is what's being used for the default version of the IMP. So again, I mean, there's so many ways you could fiddle with this. I'm just going to do a few little flicks around. I'm going to switch it into pixel mode. I'm going to grab the selection tool. And I'm just going to grab those 16 pixels, and then I'm just going to copy them, paste them into a new layer, call this IMP test, and then I'll just click on the adjustment layer. I'll do an HSL recolor, and I can just change the color. Now you notice it's changing everything, so just grab it and just drag it onto the layer. So this time, remember before we dragged it over and it kind of onto the icon to make that blue box? This time we want the whole layer to be selected, and we'll just drop it on, and now it's only going to be affecting that one layer. So let's make him a nice blue. Just fiddle with them a little bit. How's that? Then we'll just turn on our other 13 layers, and we'll do an export test. Export PNG. We'll just overwrite. And now you can see our actual palette changes happened. And there's our new imp. Oop, I killed him. There's our new imp. Now look, remember, I'll talk about this in a sec, but remember, like before, because the actual, like, that's what he looks like. So if I put on full light, so I've turned on the light vision power up, right? That basically makes it zero, full brightness. So he's looking fine there. But if I come into the darkness here and turn off the light, so we can see him, see how it changes color? That's because of the ColourMap, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But again, there are so many ways you can fool around with this. I mean, so instead of using that, we could actually use another, we could go back into the vector tool and use another one of these vector things. We'll just turn off the original one, and we'll make a gradient ramp. And with the gradient ramp, we'll just make him, let's make him sort of a light green here, and we'll make him a real darker green here, like this. So change this to a slider. And we'll just do another, turn on the palettes, do another export, overwrite. And you can kind of see how it's so easy now to do these adjustments without any kind of effort at all. And you get to see it straight away in game. So now we've got our green guy, right? Just use whatever systems that you are used to using in your sRGB apps here. So for example, let's make a new layer. I'll flick it over here and I'll set it to make black and white. This is the same as assigning it to grayscale. What you're doing here is just discarding the color information. And then I can use the tones of the original graphics, the original dark to lightness ratio, by just discarding the color information from the gradient as some kind of overlay, like we can do it with luminosity, for example, or darken or multiply or whatever. Let's try luminosity, and now we'll just turn on the overlays, and we can just go file, save as, file export as a PNG, and we'll run that. All right, so here we are in game, and yeah, he's looking a little bright fluoro pink, isn't he? The luminosity really brightened up those colors. You know what? I think we'll take it back inside and do a little bit of a tweak. That luminosity layer really did lighten up the bright colors You know, I'll just take it back in and just switch that around to a different overlay method, and then we'll move on. Yeah, the highlight version actually looks way better. And again, remember, see how he looks weird coming down here? Let's fix that right now. But before we do that, I'll just show you a little trick I like to do that enables me to test my palette changes without rebuilding the whole project all the time. So I'm going to load up SLADE. I'm going to load up the Doom 2 WAD. Now in the Doom 2 WAD, we're looking at the IMP, right? So, but you can do it with any graphic inside the WAD. So I'm going to look up the IMP, which is TRO, and I'm just going to export that. I'll just make a directory called palletist, and I'll make a directory called raw imp. I'll call it imp raw, and just save that out. And what we've done, we've actually just saved out the raw file. So we went right click export, not right click graphic export. But we are actually going to do that now. So now to select them all again, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go graphics, export as PNG. And I'm going to type in imp PNG. Blammo. Okay, so we go down to our palletist. We've got the PNG files, and oh no. Okay, so this is a bug in the current version of SLADE. See how those PNGs, they've exported, but they've put a black background on. But the image that was actually exported first in the sequence, that actually comes out fine. Meaning that if you try and export a single image, you won't notice this bug existing. Now this will probably be fixed in a future update, but you know, since we're sidetracked, let's just show you the workaround. I'll just delete all those images and re-export them. I'll go back into my Doom WAD. I've still got them selected, and this time I'm going to right click and I'm going to go graphics, convert to, change it to PNG true color and hit convert all. And I don't need to save it or anything, just right click again. And now we're going to go graphics, export as PNG and save that. Come back in here and now you can see that it's exported correctly. So that's just a little fix until SLADE itself is fixed. SLADE has had a pretty rough and tumble couple of releases, to be honest. Anyway, whatever. The point is we now have the raw lumps and the PNGs. Now back in our actual builder, every time you do a Doom make, right, it builds the WAD. And in the builder, it creates all these different WADs. And one of them is called assets.wad. So if I double click on assets.wad, you can see that this has the Playpal in it. And if you have other things, it'll have, you know, like UMap info or whatever, it'll all be in here. So what you can actually do is use this asset WAD as a way of quickly testing. So I just double clicked on the asset WAD. I've got it set to automatically load SLADE when I do that. I'll get rid of the Doom 2 WAD. And then I can just right click and go import. And let's import in the raw lumps. And as you can see, these come in purple because these are not changed. These have got the original index mapping. So they're mapping to the pixels that we changed. And so they're coming in purple. So this is why I can check the way they're going to look like in Doom without actually loading Doom. I can then also, I'll just do another import. And this time I'm going to import the PNGs. Now these are coming in as true color PNGs. So they look wrong, but I can save them, click on them, come down, grab all the PNGs. And now I'm going to right click, go graphics, convert to, and I'm going to select the Doom palette and just hit convert all. So now these PNGs have been converted to the new palette. It means that when you do the conversion process, it looks at your palette, it looks at your true color image and looks at your palette and tries to find similar things. So it's remapped all those browns to this sort of, this ramp here. So not only do we get a view of the imp if he is not repalletized and he's just had his index numbers and now pointing to new pixels, but we also have a version that we can look at which is showing us what the imp looks like if he's been repalletized, which is pretty damn cool. And you can automate this so you don't have to do it every single time. So I can actually close the asset WAD. I can go back into my DoomTools folder. I'll go to source. I'll go to assets. So I'm not in convert, I'm just in assets. I go down to sprite and I'll just copy the imp raw into there. directory and all. And then I'll go into convert and I go into sprites and I'll just copy in the PNGs completely raw. Now I'll go back to my build target and I'll just do a do make. And it's going to add all that stuff in. Now, if I go to the builds and click on assets, we have the new Playpal and we have the images. So this one here, even though I didn't even bother renaming, it's imported them both. So I've got the one that hasn't been repalletized, and I've also got the one that has been repalletized. So that is a really easy way that I can check what my things are looking like without having to load Doom and kind of walk around the level and try and figure out what's going on. And you can do a similar thing as well with textures and the texture WAD. So let's get back to fixing that color map and fixing how the lighting looks on our new palette. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a color map. If you remember, we had the Doom 2 originals that we ripped out of Doom. This is the Doom 2 color map itself. Now, in the second tutorial in this series, the whole tutorial was on the color map. So I really don't want to repeat everything here, but to put very, very simply, the bottom line, this row here is unused. This row here is the invulnerability color map, which means that when you take the invulnerability power up, this is what makes the colors look the way they do. This row here, the top row, that is PAL 0. That's the same as the top row in the Playpal. It's just the pure PAL 0 colors. And that leaves all these ones here. Now, all these are the same colors in the Playpal, but slowly getting darker as each row goes down. So there's 31 rows here, and each one denotes a different level of darkness as the character moves into shade through the lighting of Doom. And what's interesting about the color map is that it's palleted. Even though this is a slowly darkening shade, every single color in the color map has to be part of PAL 0. What this is saying is that whatever index color is at this index number, when you're in a darker area of the lighting, render it with this new index color. And the important thing is that it's palleted. So while this is a visual representation, it's not really, it's just a data block inside the game, but this is a visual representation of what's happening. In reality, the index numbers is just shifting. So it's actually more just shifting the color along PAL 0. So the two red squares in this graphic are actually the same color. And all it's saying is, at this light level, render index color A as index color B. So that's why it's called a color map, because it maps one color to another. And like I said, the actual color map tutorial has got this explained in much more detail. I just want to move on. So the problem is, if we load up SLADE and we load up the original Doom 2 WAD, and I'm also going to load up the WAD that we just made. So this is the WAD we just made. Remember, there's nothing in it except the Playpal. But if we click on the Playpal, you can see our custom Playpal here, and you can see our custom, weird custom paint palettes, which are like fluoro colors. And you've got our custom item flash, that pinky flash, and you've got our Radsuit color. But we're really talking about PAL 0 here. Now, if I go into Doom and I look at the color map there, you can see this is the color map inside Doom. Now, if I copy that and paste it into here, now look at it. So why this looks so weird is because this is a palleted image. This is a representation of the actual global Playpal. And we've changed colors in the Playpal willy-nilly, and that has changed colors in here. And so remember, the way this works, if I zoom in, this color here is saying when you get to this light level, change to this index number, but now that index number is actually a kind of purpley color. So you get a lot of really weird results if you don't rebuild your color map. So I'm just gonna call this D2 ColourMap, just so we've got it backed up. SLADE does have a function where you can right click on the Playpal and go down here to generate color maps. And this will generate a new color map based upon your current Playpal. So I can just go bloomp and bloomp. And you can see now it's looking much more like it should. Now, I'm just going to load up a famous WOD called Neon Overdrive that has a very nice custom palette and a very nice custom color map. So I'm just going to rename that Neo Orig, and then I'm going to right click on the Playpal. I'm going to come down to palette and I'm going to click on generate color maps. Okay. And that's going to create a color map right down here. I'm just going to Control X to copy that and move it up the top and go Control V just so it's all visible. Now you can see the difference in the two color maps. If I just zoom in, you can see that the default color map that is generated by either my scripts or by SLADE is using the original Doom palette as a base reference. That doesn't mean that you're limited to that. So here you see that they've made a much more smooth, awesome looking gradient for the colors. So one of the things you'll notice about the original Doom style color maps, so say if I load up Doom, is that there's a lot of pure black, like all these black levels. Like look at this for the reds. All of that is basically pure black or pretty close to it. And what that means is as the light levels go down, it gets to the point where it just becomes pure black. So even though there's 256 light levels, which turn into 32 color map changes, that's the 32 lines of the color map. Once you get below a certain point in your map editing, it'll actually just look pure black because there's so much black in the color map. So what a lot of people do when they're making their own custom ones is that they continue the color right down. Look, the pure black is only at the very base of this corner of this image, and the rest is like a nice graduating color. So if you are going to go to the trouble of making your own palettes, you really should have a look at making your own color maps more than just using the automatic generation. The automatic generation is a great place to start, especially if you're only editing sections of your color map, because all the bits that you don't touch will look the same. So if we have a look at our asset WOD, so we've got our custom palette, but all we've changed is this one thing. Everything else is just normal Doom 2. So if we generate a color map, you can see if I bring in the Doom 2 color map and I'll just paste that in there, you can see that basically it's recreated a perfect version of the Doom color map for all the colors we haven't edited. Okay, so that is the custom color map that it's created for us, and this is the original Doom one. So you can see that it's fixed all the purple in the wrong bits. So there's the color map generation thing's really useful, and unfortunately it is only inside SLADE at the moment. It's just a base to start with. You really want to kind of follow Astral Fiend's advice here, or not advice, example I should say, and make sure that you are really taking advantage of having a custom color map by building your own gradients for the lighting. So let's actually finally get round to fixing our imp. So we're going to load up the asset WOD, and here we have the Playpal that we made. And to starters, we're going to right click on the Playpal and go to Palette and select Generate Color Maps. And this is going to give us our kind of base starting color map. And why don't we have a look at what this looks like straight away. So we're going to go right click on the color map. We're going to go graphic, export as PNG. And in our projector for DoomTools, we're going to go into source, convert color maps, and just save that there. And then I'm just going to run Doom make. And then I'm going to run Doom. And I have a bat file for that, so I'm just going to type doom make -- no sound. Okay, so we're in, and there's our guy. He's looking bad, but remember we're in the light here, so let's see what he looks like in darkness. And you can see just from doing the default auto generator, he's actually looking pretty good. A bit of Doom errors there, getting stuck on the steps. So just from that very simple automatically generated color map, we have a very usable color map that looks good in game without any effort at all. Okay, once again, I'm skipping the actual creation of this document. You can see that in another video if you want to see how this file is actually constructed and built. But basically, what we have here is the kind of document I use when I'm editing color maps. What it basically is that I start with the auto-generated color map done in SLADE, except I use a custom Python script, but it's basically the same thing. It's just the auto-generated color map that SLADE produces. Then I create a blank color map, which is just like creating the blank Playpal. It's just the top line copied into every single other line. So it's the whole color map, but with no actual mapping. Everything is identical. I also leave the bottom two layers off because that's where the invulnerability layer and the ignored layer is. And that way it doesn't interfere at all. So that's all I've done. Just copied that top line into all these other lines to make a blank color map. This here is my color map exported from SLADE. And then I create a sort of overlay where I only allow the color ramp that I'm currently working on, in this case, this purple area, to have mapping, and everything else is using the blank map. And that way I can turn this layer off and get to see what Doom is supposed to look like, and I can turn it on and get to see what just my color map adjustments are affecting and nothing else, because everything else will be completely ignoring all lighting. Now, there is one little caveat that you've got to keep an eye on when you're talking about these lighting levels. So to demonstrate that, I've just taken the color map and on line 15, 16, and 17, remember I always count from 0, I've just put a very obvious color ramp. So when we get to those lighting levels, it's going to change color dramatically so we can see what's actually happening. So let's export this. First, I'll export the color map itself. So we send that to a folder, source, convert color maps. And then I'm just going to turn on the blank color map and send that out as well. And that goes into convert color map secondary. Then I'm just going to do DoomMate and then run Doom and warp to the second level. So here I am inside. So here we are in a test room that I use when I'm testing my color maps, and you can download this from the description if you want to use it. And if you look at the longer form tutorial, I show you how to integrate this into your Doom project so you can test things on the fly. You can use this to test textures, sprites, whatever. But anyway, the point is, what I want to get at here is that we edited line 15 of the color map. Okay, so all this WAD is where I've got 32 rooms to match the 32 lines of the color map, and I've written the lighting levels that are used in that room. So all I've done is divide 256 by 32, and that creates what technically should be the line of the color map that's being changed by the lighting. But you'll note that it's not. I'm on line 15, line 16, line 17 doesn't change, but look right down there, it is all changing. And that is because it's not just the lighting levels that's taken into account in Doom. It's also the distance from the camera, the angle of the camera, and even what's happening through the lighting. Like if these were flashing or glowing, it's going to change what color map is being used. So over here, you can see those 3 lines that we changed, and they're all bouncing around. If we come down to 15 and we get really, really close, there's a monster blocking line here. You can see the changes in the color map as well. And that is something you really got to keep in mind when you're editing your color map. You want to use these graduations of color because you want to make sure that there isn't these sort of jumping changes as the engine is going to be constantly bouncing around all over the place. It's not this very smooth graduated thing. In MBF21, which is what I use, you have all the graduations of color, and you can see how it gets black down here. This is actually because there's so much black in the color map. Like if I just zip over to, I've got another color map loaded here where I've taken away all the lighting except for the one imp that we were working on. And you can see that basically it's all black all the way down here. And that's because the color map does all the lighting. Everything in the lighting comes from the color map. But if you're doing in vanilla, it actually only uses parts of the color map. I think it's like light levels of 32. Like if I did this same thing and I loaded up in chocolate, instead of having this really smooth graduation of color as it goes down, it would be in these big massive steps. And that's why most people, when they're mapping, They don't start at 255 because it's so bright. They start around maybe like 192, 184, 192, or maybe around here. And that gives there somewhere to go when they glowing or have to highlight something like a switch. They want it to be brighter on the wall or whatever. And they often, instead of going down, you know, one color map at a time, they are jumping down 16 colors, 32 colors at a time. And that also keeps it in step with the kind of graduation you see in vanilla Doom if you're making your WAD available to a lot more formats. So there's a lot to think of when you're doing your color map. The major thing I want you to take away from this little bit of the video is that the color map is constantly bouncing all over the place. It's not just picking a line and hanging there like a palette. It's jumping around, and you can see it bouncing around between all those different levels. You know, and as we get closer, it's changing as well. So it's really important that your colors have graduation of color, you know, not just going crazy. So the user doesn't have these stark jumps. Now there's going to be a little bit of a continuity error because that whole section of adding in my demo room was a last minute addition to the tutorial. So it's kind of inserted into the video after it was finished. So there's going to be a little bit of a continuity problem here. But anyway, I'm just going to keep going because I don't want to have to redo the whole tutorial from this point onwards. We're going to pick up from when we've created the blank color map. So we've created the blank color map and we now need to create the actual custom color map, which has our own gradient design. So now we've got that blank one. So what we want to do is recreate the original Doom 2 lighting, and we've already got that because we've generated a color map using the built-in generator, or you've generated it with my script or something. And what this has done is it's repalletized the Doom color map. Well, it hasn't really, it's actually recreated it, but during the recreation, we've gotten rid of all those dodgy purples and pinks you saw in SLADE, because just the same way that we've repalletized the imps, remember we repalletized the imps from purple to brown, it repalletizes the color map to make it all using the proper colors or as close to the proper colors as it can find. And it's done a pretty good job. I mean, obviously there's purple down here now, but still, it's pretty good. So what we want to do is we're only going to be working on the purple. And it should be noted that building custom palettes and building custom color maps is actually quite an involved process, as in it takes time to get it sort of tweaked to look really good. And I'll be doing some techniques, but the results aren't going to be perfect because I'm trying to do it quickly. So the first thing we're going to try is just doing a gradient overlay of some sort. So let's just grab the gradient tool, and with the rectangle selected, I'll call this color edit. I'm just going to draw a gradient. We'll click on the top node and we'll make that white, and we'll click on the bottom node and we'll make that black. What I might do is let's do it a bit like that, and then I'll grab the middle point. Oop, I don't want to make a node. I'll just grab the middle point and just slide that up a little. Okay, and now all I need to do is let's fiddle with some of the overlays. How about that? Multiply doesn't look too bad. Let's try multiply. Okay, it's quite a big chunk difference at the start there, but like I said, we're only going to do this fairly roughly. How about that? Looking a little better. What I might do is I might actually continue this up like that. How about that? Okay, so that's like a pretty nice looking gradient. Let's export that out, save it. We'll give that a build. And you can see now we've got our lighting back because of the rest of the lighting. And you can see that it's very, very dark down here. And you know what we can even do if we wanted is we can turn on the color map blank and turn off the original one. So we've only got lighting on the imp, and we can see exactly what the imp lighting is going to look like for those purple colors. You see? And you see it gets very, very dark. But of course, that down here, it's completely black, just like the lighting is completely black. But the thing is, something's happening here that I haven't told you. So if I load up SLADE, and let's load up the WAD we just created and have a look at the color map, check out the color map that we've got here. It's actually doesn't look anything like our ColourMap. And that is because, like I've said a few times, the ColourMap is palleted. It can't use colors that are not in the Playpal. So during the conversion process, it's just like converting any kind of graphic. It's repalletizing the ColourMap, and it's only able to go to whatever is the nearest values. And the other ones are going all black. That's why all these are coming out black. These are coming out gray, and it's not very cool. How do we fix that? So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a preview of what the palleted graphics look like in our sRGB application. And I go into how to do this in the previous tutorial, which is basically just on this topic, on how to create what are called cube files or halids or LUTs, whatever you want to call them. They're basically just a type of file that can be loaded into an adjustment layer, which will palletize your image. And it's a near approximation. If you want an exact approximation, you need to use Kirta, which actually has proper palleted layer systems. That's such a great app. Anyway, I don't want to go into creating the halids because that's all in the other tutorial. So just go there. I'm just going to use my custom bat file I created, which just runs the image magic commands for me. And I just input a Playpal and output a cube file. So what I can do here is I can just type in doomcube playpal.png, and this is going to create the halid for me and create the cube out of it. So here we are back in Affinity, and I actually forgot to save my Affinity project, so I've tried to recreate it the same way it was. But what we want to do now is add a LUT layer. So I'm going to click on the adjustment layer and click on LUT. In Photoshop, it's called color lookup, and in Kirta, it's called palletisation. So I'm just going to hit load LUT, and I've moved that cube file into my CMap edit folder. And by clicking that, you can see I get an approximation of what it's going to look like. Now, unfortunately, because I had to rebuild the file, it's looking a little different from the one I showed you in the example, but this is actually a damn good approximation. As I adjust, you can see that I'm getting the preview of what it's eventually going to look like. And that's really helpful, not only for ColourMap editing, creating textures, creating title screens, creating text fonts, whatever. These cube files allow you to work in full sRGB, but preview basically what it's going to look like after conversion. So what we want to do, we want to just quickly have a quick look at how we can improve this. Okay, so I've done a bit of fiddling around, and what I've basically done is just I've done a few layers. One of the things you've got to try and do is you've got to try and remember to keep some of this black in the higher values of the darkness level. Otherwise, when you import it into your color map, as it goes down, because the colors are in steps, as you go down into different layers of darkness, you end up with very flat looking colors. You lose a lot of the detail because the deep dark shades are not coming through. Because remember, the way the palette works is the darker shades are the crevices of the art. So you can see the creases and stuff. So if you do your gradients and you sort of flatten that all out to the same color in all these different levels, you're going to lose that. So you've got to come through and re-darken it. And I've put a little blue in it, and like I said, building a color map is artistic, and I'm trying to make a tutorial and do it, without taking the time it would take me to make a proper project color map. So we're just going to move on from here. This might not look great. We'll just see how it looks. So there's two ways you can export this now. Well, 3 ways. Basically, you can either export it with the LUT adjustment turned on, okay? And then when it's converted, it's going to convert it from the exact image you're looking at. But remember, the LUT is an approximation. So sometimes if you turn the LUT off, you can see how DoomTools is going to convert it. So I've turned the LUT off, so it's back to true color. And let's do an export. We'll just rebuild that. And you can see we've basically got our imp back now. So he's looking nice in the brights. And as we get down, look, he's getting a little bit darker. Might be getting a little dark too quickly. And you probably can't see it in the video, but even on the blackest black, you can still just see him. You can still just see him. which is, I think, is important rather than having it pure black. So it's not looking too bad. It might be a little bit going a bit dark a little bit too quickly. So the upshot of that little test is that I'd probably want to make this bright area a little bit brighter going further down, because it gets a little bit dark a little bit too quickly. But I'm not going to do any more edits. We get the point that it's editable and how to edit it, and just use your normal sRGB skills to do it. The point is we're editing it in a sRGB app, and we're using the LUT adjustment layer to produce it. So now that I've got that saved out, I'll just do one final export to make sure I'm exporting it correctly. I'll export it without the LUT on. And let's have a look at it in actual E1 Map 01. Okay, there he is, looking pretty good. Come into the shadows. Nice graduation of color as he walks down the steps. Ooh, God, those paint palettes are so ridiculous. But yeah, like I said, it still needs some tweaking, but we got pretty close there for about 5 seconds work. Now, just before I continue, I just want to say that when I was doing this, I was using gradients and some, effects, but you can, don't be afraid of just literally using the painting tool, or literally just using pixel for pixel drawing. If we load up SLADE, and let's just load up Neon Overdrive again. If we have a look at their color map, you can see how it's like these sort of banding effects. I mean, he could have done, I don't know how he did it, but he could have done this with circular paintbrushes and just painted them in manually. Who knows how he did it? I just used gradient maps just to make it quick. But I will show you one other thing that is quite interesting. Basically, while I've got SLADE open, let's just load up the Doom 2 WAD, and we'll just have a look at our imp. So see how his eyes, we've got these sort of red colors in his eyes. If I just go to the color remap and I load up a file that I've made earlier, you can see that I've found the colors that create those eyes. So we've got color 175, color 187, and color 190. Now, the reason why I've isolated those 3 pixels is because when you're creating your palettes, you can actually reserve pixel data for specific uses. So like you could have reds for your bloods and reds for your wall textures and stuff. But I could actually, using the color remapping tool, remap these colors 175, 187, 190, and there's probably some other variants to a separate set of pixels that are only used for eyes. And then I can change the color map information for individual pixels that I have assigned to individual tasks inside my overall palette design. Meaning that I could have blood, red walls, my imp all being done with the global lighting, and then have different kind of lighting for eyes or, fireballs or whatever. This leads me into a really great tip that I got off Raven Desk about how to make really nice looking palettes. So if I just go to Asset WAD and look at our palette here, this is all we've done is created this one purple line. We might not need that entire line to color our imp and have him look good. So let's grab the imp and I'll just paste him into the Assets WAD for a sec, just so we can see what he looks like. Just zoom out so we get a little better view. Now, if I go to the color remapping tool for him, and remember the remapping tool, it was all, I did a whole video on this and the other thing. He's currently using this entire sort of purple line here, but he might still look pretty good if we only use these colors. You see, he still looks pretty good. Or maybe even these colors. And of course, if you actually did this properly, you'd be able to create the ramp in a way that better reflects the color. So what I've done here is, even though the imp is still looking kind of purple, we can still see detail. we've reclaimed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purple colors that are not being used in the imp itself. And then I can use these reclaimed colors from this ramp to create a second ramp, which is designed to be just used inside the color map to get better graduation of pixels during the darkening of my sprite. So what I'm trying to get here is, because the limitations of Doom, the color information and the pixel information is already so limited, you can actually even reduce some of these ramps and only use parts of them. In fact, you can set up your Playpal so specific ramps and specific pixels inside the palette have specific jobs. I'm saying Pacific a lot, I'm getting tongue-tied, but they can have their own jobs separate from actually what your sprites look like. They can be used just for the color map. And this is how some of those really advanced WODs that you see, you can get like these really amazing graduations of color. And it's because they've actually reserved colors for the lighting effects and reduced the colors used in the actual sprites. Now, if you do this kind of technique, you're going to have to do a lot of repalletization of the original graphics. Like, say, if I want to just affect his eyes, I need to remap all the imp graphics so those eye pixels are using my eye in inverted commas part of my Playpal. Now, I'm not going to bother doing that for this demo. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take our color map and I'm just going to remove all the color information on all the red pixels, which will contain the eyes, just so you can see what I'm talking about, where you can make specific parts of your color map affect specific parts of your sprites. Let's export this, and I'll export this to our main color map. I'll do a warp. You can see, even at the really low light levels, you can see his eyes. So if you were going to be doing this effect yourself, you would have a section of your color map that you map for demon eyes or fire or whatever, and you can make them darken less, and you can get a kind of glowing eye effect even outside of Doom. And this is just to sort of demonstrate that when you're building your color map, it's really about what you want to be visible. That's the way I think about it. And if you go into your color map with that excellent advice from Raven Desk, if you're, say there's red here and you've got a red demon, you might only need that many colors to actually color him and make him look good. And you've got all these other colors that you can assign just for the use of color graduations in your color map. Because yeah, color obviously matters, but what makes Doom look the way it does is the color map. The color map is what the user sees when they're playing. But anyway, so that's just a couple of little tips, and don't be afraid to just physically paint your color map. Okay, so this tutorial's gotten away from me. It's incredibly long. Sorry about that. I call myself Tragic the Blathering for a reason. I just can't shut up. But we're going to discuss one more thing, and that's the invulnerability map, which is what you see when you pick up the invulnerability power-up. As discussed a few times, is this sort of gray line down the bottom here. And it is a simple color map, just like anything else in the color map. It's remapping to existing colors that exist in your Playpal. And there is a bug, I think, I'm not sure whether the bug was fixed in modern source ports, but the color map doesn't affect the sky itself. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's usually a good idea, especially if you're doing vanilla stuff, to put your invulnerability spheres inside buildings rather than out in the open. Anyway, whatever. The point is, all we need to do to change the map is change this line here. So what I kind of like to do is use the value information from the original color map as a way of tinting my own color map. So all I've done here is I've taken that single line of pixels and I've put it as a color burn overlay over a nice blue, and I get a kind of version of the color map that has a similar kind of value changes as the original Doom, but this time it's blue. I'll turn off the LUT and I'll do an export. Replace the color map inside the source convert color maps and just do a demake or doom make, and then run Doom, which in my case is just demake no sound. And then all I need to do is turn on the invulnerability palette. And you can see it's come out, obviously changed, but it's very, very bright and crazy, right? And I don't know why this happens, but this happens all the time when editing the invulnerability palette. Whatever you put in here always comes out super, super intensely bright. And I'm not quite sure why that occurs, but you can see, obviously I've got a pretty bright blue here, but even if I darken this blue, we'll still get a very bright result. Let's just do that again. This time I've made the blue much darker. It's still this really blown out looking thing, right? For some reason, and if someone knows why this is, you can let me know, is you can actually invert this. If I actually invert this invulnerability color map, so now I have an inverted version of the invulnerability palette, and I'm going to use that as the adjustment layer. So basically we've just reversed it so the dark areas are now light and the light areas are now dark, where the original palette, it was the opposite way. And don't ask me why, but now when we export that, it looks a lot better. See, now this is our new invulnerability palette, looking much better. And because it's coming out looking nicer, I don't have to make it so dark anymore. So that's a little trick for getting your invulnerability palettes to look a lot better than you often see them, is by using the original values of the default Doom invulnerability palette. So you're using the chroma levels of the white to black that they give you, inverting it, and then using that as an overlay to adjust the value levels of whatever color you want to make your entire thing. And you know, this is a color map, so you could have multiple things by adjusting individual ramps inside your invulnerability palette. So I could make the imp, for example, glow, or any of the sprites that I'm using just for monsters or whatever, I could make them glow so they come out like a nice pinky color while everything else is blue. And you can use this for things like predator vision effects or whatever the hell you want to do. You know, just depends what you want to do. The point is, you don't have to make it one big long color. It is a color map, just like every other part of the color map. You can use multiple colors in your invulnerability palette. I guess I could just show you that example right now. So if I come over here, I go to my color, I just put another little box here, drag this down, and I'll make this, how about make this a red color like that, or a bit of orange in there, whatever. And I just export this, turn on my invulnerability power up, and you can see I've got like a colored monster, even though I've got the invulnerability palette on. So it's still a normal color map that you can have all your normal adjustments in. But for some reason, don't ask me why, they just tend to look better if you invert the original values that came inside Doom. Okay, so that is about that for that tutorial. I actually meant for this to be short, and I did want to talk about Kirta, which is another painting app that I use, which is absolutely amazing. And one of the great things about Kirta is that it has really well-designed pixel editing skills. So, you know, it's completely free. I actually prefer Kirta for pixel drawing than Sprite, which is a very, very famous one. And it has built-in palletization tools, so you don't need to use LUTs and all that stuff. You can literally load up a Gimp palette file, which you can just download off the internet and just get your LUTs working that way through the palletization layer. Anyway, whatever. The point is, I hope this has been helpful, and I, you know, if you get to the end of this video, type 15 into the comments. I'm curious to know if anyone actually watches this. And I will see you guys next time.